I am Scott Bennett, and I am completing the term of now Treasurer Mike Frericks. Does everybody know Mike, for the most part? One thing that, okay. And I always, whenever I see a podium, and I know I'm coming to speak, I hope that it's not already been adjusted for my predecessor. The guy's almost 7 feet tall, something that was conveyed to me when I took over and came into all his offices, and all his desks are on risers. His chairs are adjusted. It's hard to feel like a powerful senator, as I was saying earlier today, when your legs are kicking in the air and you can't reach the ground. But nevertheless, I'm here, and I do represent the 52nd District in the State Senate, representing the Champaign-Urbana areas, Danville area, Champaign and Vermilion counties. And I'm very honored to be here for the first time to speak to you. I appreciate the invitation to come. Prior to my appointment to the Senate, I was a prosecutor in the Champaign County. My wife and I live in Champaign with our 17-month-old twins, a boy and a girl. Stay very busy. And I have a passion for education that I come to very honestly. My father-in-law was a teacher and now a department head at a public university in Kansas. My parents are both instructors in community college level in Texas. And my wife has a doctorate from the University of Illinois in education, which she earned with a waiver when she worked her way through the admissions department in school there. My family has been tied to education for a long time. My grandmother, who's the kind of matriarch of our family, went to college back in the 30s when it wasn't that common for 18-year-old girls living in the country to go. But instead she was valedictorian of her high school class and was able to find a car and would make the 30-mile trek through dirt roads to attend what is now Illinois State University. And with that degree, she went out and began teaching in a one-room schoolhouse in Ford County, Illinois, which is between Bloomington and Champaign, for those that aren't aware of where that's at. Her students still visit her. She's now 93. Her students are in their 80s. And I always say, boy, you must have been a pretty good teacher. And then she always kind of comes back with, well, they only had the one. I was their teacher all the way through, from first grade until they matriculated. So they know me pretty well, and I have a good relationship with them. I said, what was your favorite part of teaching in a one-room schoolhouse? She said, well, once or twice a year, I'd get 9 or 10 of them in my car. Apparently seatbelt laws have changed a little bit. And we would drive a couple miles over to the next one-room schoolhouse where we would have a baseball game. And we do that in the spring. And that's one of the bonding things that the students did to kind of get together when they weren't, a very hard life for a farm area. Of course, most of the year they were working out with their families, but they also found time to be children too and to get that education. And it meant enough to them that 60, 70 years later, they're still coming to a small town in Illinois to visit their teacher. Education's changed a lot in this state since then, but it's more important now than ever. When I came to the Senate, I came with some life experiences which I knew I would hope at least would help me kind of guide through legislation that I would pass and my beliefs. And one of them came as from my experience as a prosecutor in Central Illinois. Too many cases that I've prosecuted and been part of, I saw young men and women that were going down a path of criminality when you saw they had a lot more potential where they'd have any other opportunities. You saw street smarts for miles if they only had a practical application and a realistic avenue to get there that would actually let them live as productive members of society, but also help them reach their own potential. But they don't have those opportunities now. And I'm hoping that we can start to change that in certain ways. This doesn't seem to be the year that I'm joined with that belief, though. About 3 weeks after I became a senator, our governor came to the University of Illinois and gave a speech. And I sat next to the chancellor of the Urbana-Champaign campus and listened as the governor pointed to her and talked about his long relationship with the university and how important it is that as an economic engine, for example, for an area, that we invest in our universities. And then I sat there a month later as he told our chamber that he was going to cut the funding for higher education by 31%. I'm new and I'm hoping somebody can help me. They've got a lot of smart people in this room. Somebody can tell me how these two ideas are consistent, because I haven't figured it out yet. But it's clear to me, and what I've tried to do in the time I've been there is to make clear to other people, is that this is not the path to getting Illinois in the right direction. This is 180 degrees in the opposite direction. I serve on two important committees in the Senate. One is the Higher Education Committee, and the other is the Appropriations Committee that funds higher education. And in those roles, I have sat for day after day and heard from your university presidents. Listened to them come and tried to ask and elicit testimony so that I can then go and argue to the other senators who are from all over the state. You heard the president say this would mean X. Your presidents have had varying degrees of performances in front of those committees. There are some that I've been impressed with, and I mentioned this morning the president of Western. I don't know him other than that experience, but was very impressed with the way he stood up for his university, stood up for his students, talked very frankly about, in answer to your question, senators, if you go ahead with the proposed cuts, tuition in my university would increase 65% next year. And that would, I'm glad you asked, that would have an effect on my students. You'd find less of them, you'd find less diversity in them, and frankly, you'd see a lot more smart students who were used to coming here for a bargain price going out of state. Other presidents have talked about, I couldn't raise tuition, I just cut it in personnel, which I'm sure some of you have concerns about. I did as well. And we tried to couch in terms of, certain university that's in the room today, 250 employees positions would be eliminated, which is a nice way to say what it means. And how would that be noticed by students? Well, you'd see larger class sizes. I suppose that would have an effect. Okay, what about non-academic professions? How would that impact? Would you have deferred maintenance at universities? All things we like to put on our promotional pictures for the universities to attract new students. Would those look as nice? Would those be the same experience as being on campus? Well, no, I guess they wouldn't. They would also suffer greatly. And we would see ultimately less people interested in our universities and looking elsewhere for their opportunities. This is, the people in this room, I hope you understand, we are just at the beginning of this process. We are hoping to make a strong fight for how to fight these proposed cuts. But I'll be honest with you, I see too much complacency, and I don't think necessarily people that come here on a Saturday morning. I'm not saying it's the delegates. But there's too much complacency with administrations. There's too much complacency with student bodies who know that either they or their parents are shouldering debt they will pay the rest of their lives. They're going to be more monthly than my mortgage payment is. Little side note on that, when I graduated from the University of Illinois Law School in 2002, my tuition, in-state tuition, was just under $10,000 a year. I worked two jobs at the time. My parents helped out as they could, and ended up with debt that I was able to pay off in a regular amount of time. The tuition for students now that are interning my office is almost $40,000 a year for in-state students. In 12 short years, a 4-time multiplier. And I went to become a prosecutor, went into public service. It's curious to me how we can expect the best and the brightest students to stay here in Illinois and become public defenders or prosecutors or work in legal aid clinics, because you're going to have student debt you will never end up even hoping to achieve payment for. And that's just a personal note where I've seen tuition increase. But what you can do, the day after the budget address, I was invited with another senator who represents a downstate university. We were invited to a Springfield news station. We were asked about these cuts. And I won't name the senator, but I went a little crazy on my first live interview and said at 6 in the morning, this is outrageous, and 31%, and it's going to fall on the backs of the students, and here's all the effects we're going to end up having. And then I listened to my counterpart, who was maybe coincidentally in the same party as the governor who proposed those cuts. And I was curious as to how he would respond to 31% cuts to the largest employer in his district as well. I listened as he woke me up, it being 6 o'clock in the morning. I was surprised as to hear him talk about how it was a responsible budget and we've been living beyond our means, and I think we'll just adapt. We'll be fine. That tells me two things. well, perhaps one thing that I'll keep to myself about whether or not he's a good advocate for his district. But what it also suggests to me is, boy, that guy is safe in his district. He is not worried in any way about throwing his largest employer and his only public university right under the bus so that he doesn't run afoul of the governor who's proposing these cuts. Whereas he might be in a better position to go to the governor. I mean, they expect me to have the liberal knee-jerk reaction of, you can't make these cuts. But if it was coming from someone from his own party and said, here's why this probably isn't the best economic engine. You want me to make the economic argument? Okay. In the University of Illinois, and I'm sure you can make this argument for most universities, every dollar the state sends to the University of Illinois, it leverages 4 more non-state dollars into our economy. For research dollars and what our graduates are able to achieve, 4 to 1. Our governor made a lot of money in the private sector making investments where I guarantee he didn't get the 4 to 1 return on his investment. But this is one as a state we can simply not afford to cut and to turn our backs on. You could make a similar argument for each and every one of your universities. I'm just surprised that your senators aren't doing so. So what I would ask is when you go back to your districts, to make sure that you and the people that you have influence with reach out to your legislators. Because I'm quite surprised at how often when certain senators will ask in these committees, Mr. President of your university, tell me about these cuts and tell us how severe they are. The other side we get from the other side is, boy, $35 million we're going to cut. Tell me about your unfunded mandates. And they're bad, don't get me wrong. How much could that save you? Well, $2-3 million. Boy, we could take that off your back, couldn't we? $3 million is not going to cut at all into the $35 million that we're proposing to cut. But that's the impression, well, maybe we'll help you out with the unfunded mandates. Certainly we want to do that too. The more money we can get in the university, the more money we can provide opportunities for people. But one is not a wash for the other. I'm going to do a little self-promotion because I'm a politician now. One thing that I'm trying to do is sit down with my fellow senators on these committees and explain to them it's not a Champaign-Urbana issue. There are universities all over this state that care about this. And by the way, their graduates are in each and every one of your districts. So on my website, senatorbennett.com, I have a petition, which I've started. Right when you first get there, it takes about 10 seconds. And it's simply to oppose the governor's cuts to higher education. It's not exclusive to the Urbana-Champaign campus. It's the entire state. What I'm hoping to do is at the end, meet with the governor, show him that many people in places that voted for you do not want these kind of cuts. They don't think it's taking our universities and our state in the right direction. So I would ask that you would take a look at that and promote it as you see fit. But no matter what you do, please reach out to your own legislators so it's not just 1 or 2 of us that are sitting at the table pounding our fists for these dollars. The governor's got $6 billion he's trying to find in the next budget. And one way that he finds almost a third of it is to shift the pension. I don't have to explain to people in this room about the tier system, right? Tier 1, Tier 2. This is great. Normally I have to go and spend 5 minutes explaining the tier system. I'll just skip ahead on that part. But one thing I think is interesting is the governor in the $6 billion he's trying to find assumes a $2.2 billion savings because everybody that's in Tier 1 now gets moved over into Tier 2. I'm assuming nobody in this room is going to have a problem with that. We won't have any litigation about that because he's went ahead and just assumed the savings into that budget as if it's going to pass. One, I haven't seen one bill even suggesting it. Nobody's brave enough to try that yet. But we'll see. We were talking earlier. There's a bill right now in the Senate, Senator Brady from Bloomington, suggesting that we phase all public universities into private within 6 years. Again, I know you all know that. I've been going around the state talking about cuts to public universities. And I have a line that I say a lot, which is, you can only call Eastern Illinois University a public university so long with a straight face before you realize, well, actually, it's almost all funded by tuition now. And you can say the same thing all. I've been saying that for a long time. We are also proud of our public universities. Well, we say that. We say that particularly when our sports teams do well. But when it comes down to putting our money down to show our commitments, our priorities, it's not there. But people kind of go, well, maybe private, public, they put it in law. They're at least a proposal for law, which is great. It helps me show this is the direction that certain people in the legislature in Springfield are trying to take it. And the reason now that you have to get energized and fight back. Obviously, the pension shift I thought was interesting because assuming that $2.2 billion savings, that's a technique that no one has ever tried before. No one has actually put that kind of creative bookkeeping into a budget. And you think about some of the predecessors, they've tried some creative things. But the fact that Governor Rauner is truly shaking up Illinois by just inventing numbers, I have a hard time imagining that any of the boardrooms that he's presided over would accept a budget like that, where you're just imagining $2.2 billion. But I think one thing we can agree on is, in public, he says, these are pensions, those promises. But then the budget proposal says something very differently. The last thing I'll talk about really quickly is waivers. And again, so nice, it's a relief. I don't have to explain it too much in detail, but what I'm talking about now are the 50% waivers for the dependents of employees of state universities after they've served 7 years. And there is obviously a movement in the House, and I know Nick and others have fought very, very hard in the House to cut those waivers, because, boy, we got a $6 billion deficit here. Wouldn't $11 million do a lot to fill that up? And that's the estimated cost of how much it would be if you eliminated the waivers of all of your children or your dependents and all the people you represent. But I'll tell you why I think that's a problem. I grew up in a farm town about half an hour outside of Champaign-Urbana. And many of my classmates' parents worked for the university. They weren't professors. They wouldn't have been 30 miles out if that had been the case maybe. But they were groundskeepers, and they were plumbers and secretaries. And some were in academics. But most of their children went on to earn degrees from public universities. And they did that by virtue of these waivers. And it's a real problem when you argue that we are okay with people working at universities, but they can't send their own children to those universities. But instead, what we're doing is seeing how it's a concept we all should embrace, right? Helping people climb up the economic ladder, helping people get the next generation get more advantage than the last. And that is how we turn our state in the direction we need it to go. The other thing that does, and I've made a point of this, and Nick has been very helpful, and when they come before the Senate, I've been trying to get every president to get on the record on what they think about this. How much does it cost your own, if it's $11 million for the whole state, how much is it for you, Eastern Illinois, or you, Western Illinois? And it's a drop in the bucket. It's almost nothing. But I say, is it worth it for you to have this waiver? And time and again, they've said, that's the way I can retain faculty. That's the way I can retain the best staff and faculty. Because, by the way, private universities are giving 100%. So it's just one more thing that as you're making cuts and cutting back what I'm able to attract and retain the best staff, it's one more thing that I can say, but you do have this. You do have this, hopefully, that'll keep you here. The other issue is, it's been quite clear that with the increasing tuition that we've had over the last decade or a little longer, the classrooms aren't even full. So it's not even really, I question the $11 million figure, because if there's an empty seat there, and you have now your children or your representatives' children that are sitting in those seats, that's not an extra cost necessarily, but what it is keeping the best and the brightest here in Illinois, where they'll hopefully continue to work. They'll pay into the tax system, which the governor should agree is what we want. And as far as the university goes, hopefully then go on to be in a stable position where they can contribute back to their university as a loan, helping the university out in the long run. These are all reasons why we need to keep that waiver system. And it's something I'm going to fight very hard for if and when it ever comes over to the Senate. There's a quote, I had to prepare a speech for Lincoln's birthday earlier this year, and I'll say it briefly, I know I need to wrap up. But he had a quote that said, "The philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next." And I've been a politician for 2 months, so I think I know a little more than Lincoln. That was the wisdom of his day, but I would expand that a little bit. I would say that I think it's not really a direct line, but you see more of a cycle. You see the philosophy of government actually then becomes the philosophy of education, which becomes the philosophy of society, which becomes, again, government, which we all circle back on. So the question needs to be, in my role in government, what does our philosophy need to be? What kind of classrooms do we want to create? What kind of society do we want you to create with what we give you? And for me, it's quite clear. We need affordable public education. We need to honor our promises to those that we've promised to in terms of pensions. And we need to fight to make sure that our best and the brightest of our students, including your own dependents, are able to stay here, particularly when many of the faculty here have stayed because of that promise. And so I want you to understand, I'm new, but I want to introduce myself and just assure you that in the time that I'm in Springfield, you have an ally on those issues. You have an ally in the Senate, you have an ally on the Higher Education and Appropriations Committee, and with your help, I hope to be in Springfield a long time fighting for your issues. I thank you again for the invitation to come. Thank you so much.